Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of a brand new podcast called The Lobby. And over here, we have the show about talking to people who cover lots of different types of things in the gaming industry, mainly in esports or just mainly in gaming in general. Joined with me today, we have an awesome guest, and I think it basically says right here we have Kay Constantine from the Fallout Miami project. How you doing today?
Pretty good, pretty good. Enjoying the summer heat.
I'm sure. Speaking of the summer heat, we're in a sort of setting where the summer heat is pretty much for sure very very hot. Would you like to talk a little bit about the game?
Oh, absolutely. So, Fallout Miami, it's a mod for Fallout 4 that takes place in Miami. Kind of obviously. We've chosen to nickname the place the Vacation Wasteland. It's a new adventure for the sole survivor, so we'll be taking your existing character from Fallout 4. And it's slightly more roleplay focused than Fallout 4 itself, so it's closer to something like a New Vegas would be, I guess. And the sort of the main theme of the mod is the struggle between order and freedom. So something very classic, very traditional from the Fallout franchise. It's been like a running theme through it since Fallout 2.
And what? So okay, this is what was the goal going behind this project? Because this is no small project. This is literally almost could arguably be a DLC pack or even just a game by itself.
I mean, we are actually framing it as an unofficial DLC, so it has that same type of size and scope.
So what was the idea behind it? Because like why didn't you talk about like so you're the lead writer and it's like is this your project? Did you hop on to it? Like what is the story behind why Miami and why choosing to do Fallout? Obviously you're all Fallout fans, but how did you guys come together?
Okay, so a little bit of history on the project itself then. The project is by a guy who's semi well known in the modding community, Mika999. He worked on Shards of Oblivion and some of the better series for Fallout 4. He originally started working on a Miami world space, mostly on his own. And over time, he started recruiting additional people to help him flesh it out a little more. So people to work on a custom soundtrack, people to do some custom assets, like maybe some weapons, some new power armor, some 2D art, 3D art, and such and such. Eventually, they reached out to me since I had offered a Skyrim mod to do some writing for them. So it was kind of out of the blue. And they reached out to me, a few other people that have done writing for mods in the past. And we sat down when we started talking about what Mika999 already had in his head for the setting. And we started thinking about it from a more narrative-focused standpoint, because, of course, we're writers. Uh, it, the key writers for this would be myself and another gentleman by the name of Sir Balin. So basically, we sat down, we started hashing things out and looking at, okay, so the one faction that was present at the start for Mika 999 was the Nuclear Patriots. So we looked at them, we looked at what kind of themes they evoke just visually, and we decided that, okay, they represent this kind of high-minded, idealistic strive for freedom, something that I've nicknamed Nietzschean anarcho-libertarianism. So we looked at that. We thought, okay, what's a good contrast to this? So something that's very providing structure to give a defense versus the chaos of the wasteland. And as now with the release trailer, we know that that's represented by the Enclave. And from there, we just started building out a plot, filling it with characters, and so on. So it's kind of a gradual process. It started from just the idea of build an interesting, visually appealing, unique world space, and from there, writers were recruited, and we started fleshing it out more and more. Until now, with the point we have quite an intricate and involved main plot, along multiple side quests, companion characters, and so on. Everything you would expect from a full Fallout experience.
And it seems really, really amazing. We're going to show the trailer in just a little bit. But was Miami the original idea, or was that something where was it going to be something else originally altogether?
Miami was definitely the original idea. Like I said, it started as a world space mod similar to Shards of Oblivion by the same person, and eventually we just started putting more and more on top of it till now we have, like I said, all the makings of a full, complete Fallout experience.
So this all sounds very exciting, and I have like a million questions as a Fallout fan myself. I'm still new to the whole experience and the community of it, but I really want to like let's treat this like anything else. What do you do on the first day or the first anything? You know, you do some social activity. So let's all take a look together at this amazing Fallout trailer for a second. I'm gonna go ahead and mute my mic if you want to mute your mic real quick, and then we'll talk more about and get a little more in depth in the trailer, and then we'll talk more about writing and how you got into writing and what is a good ideal for writing. How's that sound?
Very good.
All right, cool. Well, I'm glad you sound. I'm glad. Okay, I'm hyped. Let's show the trailer off.
The rolling sea, moon over Miami, shine on as we begin a dream or two that may come true when the time comes in.
This place used to be paradise. Now you got these young kids from up north with their souped-up cars. Don't even get me started on those slaver schmucks. But people out here survive. Some folks scavenge, others steal. The good ones band together, form communities for protection. Miami's a tough place. If it's not the gangs or the gator claws, it's the damn sandstorms. Or something much, much worse. I still remember when this place was peaceful, beautiful. We had the beaches, the celebrities. People came from all over just to vacation here. Families with children. Good, hard-working Americans. But that was a long time ago. Just do yourself a favor. Don't go near that building. Something strange is going on. And I hate to say it, but this might be the beginning of something big.
And that was the trailer right there for you. That was Fallout Miami. Looks really amazing, I honestly gotta say. So let's talk a little more in depth about this trailer itself. So let's talk about what are some of the enemies you can expect in this game. Sorry, we'll go ahead and mute that because I'm looking at a couple of frames here. And yeah, so let's talk about what are some of the enemies that you can see, because I saw like this like when they were, before it went to that transition of like the epic sound trumpet going into it, I saw like a tall lizard looking thing.
Oh yeah, those are the gator claws that were introduced in the Nuka World DLC. We thought that they fit really well with the setting, right? Because it's right near the Everglades, it's all swampy. Florida is known for its gators, right? So gator claws are a natural fit. And we've actually taken it to the point where there are no death claws in Miami, there are only gator claws.
Okay, and what are some? Is there anything you can tell us about, like some potential ideas that you've been sort of spitballing all together?
Well, a little while ago, we actually, in our monthly progress updates, which we post on our Discord and social media, we showed off concept art for another type of claw creature, which is the shark claw, which is based on hammerhead shark.
Okay, I mean, I love that idea. I think that sounds really fun. And uh, are we expecting any new? I guess sort of one of the things that I'm kind of curious about, because you said if it's not the gangs, are there any like type of new sort of like clans or cults or just sort of a antagonist group that we could expect, or is it all going to be just sort of all familiar faces from here?
So yeah, factions and groups in general are a really big thing in Miami, right? It's structured similarly to New Vegas in that sense. So I'm going to say antagonist is a little bit of a loaded word. We believe in player choice to a very, very great extent. As
Sure.
far as factions that would be something that the player would kind of be against in most cases, that would definitely be the slavers. In fact, I don't think we've talked about this before, but the Slavers of Sunshine Cove, which is the name of their main sort of settlement.
Okay, and do you want, so slavers are something original? D- because what are the slavers? What is their purpose? I'm very curious about this, and like what and I see that also. I would love to learn about that, and I would love to learn also about. I saw that in the environments, the sandstorm looks really really cool. Is there any other type of environmental things that we can expect? Is there maybe potentially like hurricane season or something like that?
Oh yeah, we have a completely custom-made weather system by Manga Club, who's also a well-known modder, especially for his weather mods. So I definitely expect to see some interesting stuff on that side. And when it comes to environments, despite the fact that the map is set in Miami Beach itself, so it's very urban, we do have a slight little bit of variety in there. We recently teased it somewhat. We released the music, the ambient soundtrack for a place that we're so far calling the golf course jungle, which there's a very large golf course in Miami Beach itself. And 200 years later, that's overgrown, so it's all kinds of swampy, jungly. It's filled with mosquitoes, gator claws, and all that kind of stuff. Very vicious place.
Ooh, that sounds very exciting and also very dangerous to enter. And what? Okay, I have to ask this: the arcade machine, like where does that come from?
Okay, so a lot of people caught on to that in the YouTube comments. That's definitely inspired by the short film, the indie short film Kung Fury.
Okay, and okay, so now it's inspiration from that. And what is it now? Like? I guess I wasn't expecting an arcade machine, because like I don't remember arcade machines being from uh 1950s, if I remember correctly, or
There are actually arcade machines present in Fallout 4 and some of its DLC, so it's not like it's without precedent. But the arcade machine itself in Fallout Miami, if people pay close attention to the shot where that's shown, it's bolted onto a power armor frame. So you'd be able to run around in it if you can get your hands on that. But any more details than that, well, players are going to have to explore the world and find them for themselves.
okay, that's fair. That's fair. And I guess my last question is sort of about just sort of the environment that you can play in, or just one of the other couple questions I have, which is, uh, I so you're playing the protagonist from Fallout 4, and I did see that there's a Vault community in Miami, Vault 54,
53, yes.
53. Excuse me, sorry. Uh, and what is that kind of? Is there any sort of? I assume you're going to be able to like get to know. Ooh, I'm assuming you're sort of getting to know the community in that vault and whatnot, and what are they like?
Okay, so Vault 53, before I talk a little bit more about it, I just want to say, some people have commented that you wouldn't normally see underground structures in a place like Miami because the water table is too high. But just as any other video game or work of fiction, there's a little bit of suspension of disbelief required, right? And also, I'll say, do not underestimate the pre-war government's propensity to spend on various kinds of insane projects.
Yeah, if you got enough money, you can do pretty much anything you want, right?
Pretty much, and it's not like the U.S. government isn't known for their weird programs, especially during this era.
Yeah, you kidding me? But so apart from the suspending the disbelief, what is that? So how did it fall? Vault 53, like, did they do okay? Or did they... Because it seems like they're doing pretty fine. They seem like they kind of made it through all right.
Okay, so for players who are more investigation-oriented, they already know what the Vault experiment is, so there's no problem in talking about it. Vault 53 is actually a vault that was mentioned in Fallout Bible. It's something we stumbled across during our research for Fallout Miami. And the Vault experiment itself, so the Vault is designed to have these minor technical malfunctions and breakdowns every so often. So that's what it was originally. We've taken that and we've expanded slightly on it. So apart from things breaking down occasionally to see how the people would react, things break down in increasing severity. So things start getting worse and worse. So as far as 2287, which is when Fallout Miami is set concurrent with Fallout 4, things are pretty bad inside Vault 53, for sure.
Fair enough. And, alright, I think my last question would be, just for the people that enjoy the open world aspect of things and just sort of exploring, since there was a lot of promotion, are there going to be, like, sort of casinos and stuff that are still up and running, like in New Vegas, where there's still some form of society there?
So the way that Miami is set up when it comes to the power players and the faction and the politics and such, the space where you could say that there's post-apocalyptic civilization is actually quite narrow and doesn't really extend to the beachfront with the casinos and so on. In fact, Sunshine Cove itself, which is the main base and settlement for the slaver faction, that's built out of the remains of one of Miami's biggest and most opulent hotels before the war.
That's fair.
So when it comes to when it comes to something like functioning casinos, that's probably not something that you'd expect to see. Maybe a little bit, but not really like a big fancy casino still operating and so on.
That's understandable. So, those are really all my questions I have for Fallout 76. Fallout 76, yeah, Fallout Miami. Excuse me. I got Fallout on my brain all over the place.
Too many Fallout games, man.
I know. There's like the Fallout Shelter, Fallout 76, Fallout Miami. It's a good year for Fallout. You've kind of put the cherry on top to turn it into the golden age of Fallout. So job well done. I clap to you. So we're gonna let the audience ask some questions about Fallout Miami after I ask you one last question, and then we'll get to you about you more specifically and how to break into writing into gaming. So my last question is for you, and it's more just like just to check over. So go ahead and write down your questions for Fallout Miami, guys, and I'll read them out while I ask him this. What are some things that I didn't talk about that you specifically want to emphasize and promote about the game that hasn't been heard about yet, or that you can say?
Okay, so we've mentioned that we have companions, but I do want to stress that our companions are really fleshed out, and they have a perspective on the main quest and the main struggle happening in Miami. And the reason for that is because we take a very, very theme-focused approach to writing. So absolutely everything we do has to serve a purpose. So things aren't random in Fallout Miami. Things all kind of relate to each other and relate to the main core theme and the main quest in some way. So, like I said, the main theme of the entire experience is order versus freedom. So that's something that will be actually present in Vault 53. And the way that the player actually relates to that is that one of our companions comes from Vault 53, Kelsey James. We showed off concept art for her a little while back, in fact. So the player, whenever they encounter her, they'll be able to find out, okay, she's in Vault 53. They go there, they learn about the struggles inside the vault, so then they can help her resolve her backstory in some way, and that all relates to the overall theme in general.
All right, cool. All right, I like that. I like that. So with that being said, we'll go over some quick questions. We'll also check out the silly ones as well. So I guess question from Max7 Del Rey is, will there be any coconuts? And I guess I'll emphasize on that question a little bit more. Will there be any coconuts? And if so, will there be a useful tool in the game?
So there will in fact be coconuts, and Max7 Del Rey is in fact the original coconut in the Fallout community Discord. And for those unfamiliar, that's kind of a running gag. The coconut role itself came about because I didn't really feel like banning people who are just slightly off color but haven't broken any rules, so I gave them this dunce hat role, coconut, with a really difficult to read color for the name of this like brown that doesn't mesh well with the background. So that's why he's asking that question. But to elaborate on it, it became such a prominent thing in the community Discord that one of the factions in Fallout Miami, the Tide Riders, they're these, I like to call them hunter-surfer gatherers. So it's this surfer tribe. It's really interesting.
Ooh.
So they will use coconut as an insult for someone who's being a little bit of a dunce.
Wow, I like that. Okay, cool. So it's a useful tool in hurting someone's feelings. All right.
Very much so. But there will also be coconuts as a consumable item as well. And
Ooh.
We'll see what kind of recipes we make from that. I've been pushing for including a lot of cocktails in Fallout Miami. In fact, since we're adding lemons, oranges, coconuts, and Fallout 4 already has these existing types of alcohol, such as vodka and rum. So why not have all those nice cocktails everyone's used to?
I'm actually really excited for that, and I also would love to see. I don't know how this would work. Is like coconut helmet as like an accessory, or just some like a coconut weapon or whatever. Just as a little.
I'm going to say that you're touching on something that may exist in some form, but we haven't shown one. Maybe. Keep your eyes out, people.
I will keep my eyes out. Hashtag eyes emoji. Next question from Lolico. We'll just say that's a really silly question, but it still is. Casey, did you know you are one letter from being KFC?
Absolutely, and I quite love fried chicken.
Oh, well, fair enough. It could be also stand for Fallout. So, K, Fallout Constantine.
Very much so.
But this is from Thanox, which is, how will Fallout 4 go over into Miami? So I guess plot-wise, which is a good question for you because you're the writer, how does our protagonist just happen to end up in Miami?
So as with any other great thing in a Fallout game, it all starts with a radio signal. So the sole survivor, as they're walking around the Commonwealth, received this message, and they're being offered a job. And it's actually within the team, we did deliberate quite a bit on what exactly the radio message should include, and I was pushing a lot for the offer of a job, because the way I looked at it, we had other suggestions around, such as, okay, it's a distress signal, or it's very obvious that you're going to Miami in some way. And what I wanted to do is make it as enticing as possible for as large a group of people as possible, so as large of a variety of players. And the thing that stood out to me as a concept was, well, what do players like to do in Fallout? They like to quest. They like to go do stuff in general out in the world. And what's more evocative of that than the offer of a job with a big payout of caps?
That's very fair. It's very straightforward, and I like that. It's you know, I think that's a very good way of going about it. And out of curiosity, do we ever know what that job is that really invokes the protagonist to say, yeah, I'll go?
So the way it works, the player gets the radio signal, and they're simply told where to go for their job interview. And let's just say that after they do the interview, things go south from there.
Well, they are technically in the south. So, yeah, it did go south from there. No? Okay, cool. So, that's cool. I guess this isn't really a question, but Jay Richter says, I realize the drivable vehicles isn't really possible for the creation engine circa Fallout 4. Will the Mad Max Anarchy Liberation dude's vehicle work like Verret Bird's in F4?
That's a good question. So originally we didn't actually want to make any sort of playable vehicle mechanics in Miami, because as everyone knows, vehicles in Fallout, they don't work out very well, especially in other Bethesda games as well. But we did find out is that you can make it work and look decent if you have a very controlled environment. So the way it will work in Miami, you won't be able to ride these vehicles out in the vacation wasteland itself, but there will be controlled circumstances where if everything works out, we might end up having to cut this feature, but if everything works out, the player might just be able to get behind the steering wheel of one of these post-apocalyptic monster machines.
That sounds hype. Sometimes you just feel like you need to drive over people in video games, and that could be very satisfying. It's probably one of the most satisfying feelings in a video game, when you're just going crazy. Let's see. I suppose let's see. Let's see. From Thanex as well. Will we see any BOS?
Yeah, that's the Brotherhood of Steel.
Okay.
Well, we're not really talking about all the factions that will appear in Miami just yet. We like to announce things as they get up to a level where we're announcing them when everything looks nice. So as far as the Brotherhood of Steel are concerned, I'm not saying no, but as far as returning factions from other Fallout games are concerned, we're mostly done with that for now.
Okay, and will you be seeing any other original factions?
Yes, in the trailer, the stinger at the end, the post-credits stinger, so to say, did show off the fact that there is an Enclave presence in Miami, but that's all I'll say about that.
That's fair, that's fair. I guess, let's see, will we see any, okay, let's see, Minutemen or even Institute? So they were just asking more about that. What accents will we hear across Fallout Miami? I assume, from what I gathered by the sound of the raspy voice, is that, are there going to be like ghouls like they had in Fallout New Vegas?
Yeah, absolutely. That character, his name is Herschel Eisenberg, and he used to be a resident of New York back before the war, and he moved down to Florida, as retired people from New York tend to do.
Right.
And he eventually became a ghoul, and now he's in Miami, and you can go speak with him. As far as what kind of accents will be heard across Miami, all kinds of accents from all over the place. And the reason for that, and this ties into Miami as a location itself. When the apocalypse happened, Miami wasn't hit by nukes directly. But because the apocalypse was happening, Miami was plunged into absolute total chaos. And this is happening while there are tourists there, not only from all over America, but all over the world. So when it comes to accents, you can expect to hear a lot of strange and different things from all over the place.
That's very exciting. So yeah, that does make sense. It does make sense that there would be a lot of different accents and tourists there, especially there's in Florida, there's a lot of different ethnic backgrounds as well. Visiting Florida a lot myself as well. Ooh, this is a Max 7 Del Rey also asked, underwater vaults? I don't know, like, that's, like, will there be underwater vaults, or, like, I'm curious as, like, will we also find, will there be any underwater aspect, like, any scubaing, where we'll see, like, sort of, scavengeable things, or just sort of, relics that got caught in the nukes?
Yeah, we are planning for a little bit of gameplay like that, but the fact of the matter is that Fallout 4 isn't really built for underwater stuff, so we're trying to keep it limited somewhat. It's there because it's interesting visually, but as far as how it plays out, we don't feel that underwater gameplay is that good in Fallout, so we're trying to only keep it there as a little bit of flavor. As far as underwater vaults are concerned, a Vault 53 is built into the thin rock layer of Miami Beach. As far as other underwater structures, maybe you'll have to explore and find out for yourself.
That's fair. So I'll ask. I will ask one last question, and this is just a genuine question. Will there be a settlement building function like F4 from Thanax?
Yes, there will be settlements in Fallout Miami. There's a couple, I think 3 or 4. We still have to decide on the final number. One thing that helps our settlements stand out from Fallout 4 is that every single settlement in Fallout Miami ties into the lore and the quests. So, for example, you meet a companion and you do a quest with them, and then you get a settlement as a reward. So it's not just these random places that you discover and start building up. They're actual places that are grounded within the fiction and within the world, and you have to interact with characters in order to learn more about these places and acquire them and so on.
All right, cool. I'm very excited to see that and see what kind of like how the settlement will look like and whatnot. But I think for now, we'll stop talking about Fallout Miami just for a little bit. As much as I'm sure that it's a project that you're very proud of, that we can talk more and more. But I want to learn more about you, and I want to talk about what more of the purpose of the podcast is, which is sort of breaking into different aspects of the industry. So I would love to learn about how you got into writing and what you do in the gaming industry as far as writing stuff goes. You do some proofreading for some indie companies, and then how did you land those gigs? And then being the lead writer of Fallout Miami, which is really cool. What is how did that like? Where it's nowhere but up from here, I know that, but where is up as well?
Okay, so a little bit of story time, I guess, in that case.
Yeah.
So little 10-year-old K. Constantine is sitting in his house in the summer. He loves video games, right? But he doesn't like how video game RPGs, tend to be somewhat restrictive, right? You have either a predefined character or a character you create, but they end up having a predefined role in the main quest. So he picks up pen and paper, and this can combined with his love for all kinds of literature, fiction, nonfiction, philosophy, history, and so on. Eventually leads to 15 years later, he is absolutely obsessed with writing and devotes a lot of his free time to it. It's my biggest hobby, absolutely. And it was a gradual thing, I guess. I mean, it did start out with video games. Since a very young child, I've been really, very into video games. And also books as well. And those things just kind of seem to go together. There's one thing I really dislike when it comes to the general critique of video games that I see. And that a lot of people tend to say that video game writing specifically isn't as good as writing in books. But that never seemed to be the case for me. And it's not like I'm talking about very basic books. I've been reading a lot of complex stuff over the course of my life. And there are absolutely video games out there that stand as very good literature on their own. And it's something that fascinated me because as a storytelling medium, video games give you so much potential, so many options. There's just an infinite breadth of what you could explore, given the fact that you can offer the player choice, something that's not really present in books. And even in a choose-your-own-adventure book, as simple as those are, most of the time, even those tend to be somewhat limited in scope, just because you have to print them, and stuff that the reader won't see obviously takes up space, increases the cost, and so on. So those are always kind of limited. But in a video game, you could go wild, and that's always been something I've been really interested in.
And okay, so now you've had something that's interesting, like you found this interest, and now you took this interest and you sort of drove with it. But how did you start like taking this interest and putting it into effect? Did you sort of decide to write original games that you hope to one day make yourself still to this very day? Like, how did you build up your resume? Because right now, you have quite the resume already, but as we all know, we can all grow and learn from it. But how did you initially plant that seed?
As far as video games are concerned, for a really long time, I actually considered it practically impossible to break into this, since my chosen path of study does not relate to writing in any way. So it's not something that I'm pursuing as a career. It's more of a serious hobby that might blossom into something later down the line, and it seems to be starting to blossom. So the way I got into it, I've always been really into more obscure video games, since I feel that they try to do more interesting things in general. So indie games, absolutely my thing. Indie RPGs especially, because RPGs are my foray. I've been doing pen and paper for almost a decade now. Been playing absolutely every single computer RPG under the sun. So the way that I got into video game writing, Fallout Miami is actually the first thing within this industry where I'd say I've had a major contribution to. I've contributed here and there to other mods over the years. Stuff for Oblivion, stuff for Skyrim, Fallout New Vegas as well. But Fallout Miami is the first one where I'm actually working with a proper process, with a team, and everything like that. But outside of Miami, so here's the one game that kind of helped me realize that, no, this might actually be a reality. It's called Ash of God's Redemption. And it's this just amazing little indie RPG. It's kind of a clone of the Banner Saga, if you're familiar with that.
No, I'm not. So please enlighten me. I want to hear all about this.
So the Banner Saga is kind of like a turn-based tactical RPG, similar to the older Fallout games in a way, but it uses a visual novel style for its storytelling, and that's just such a genius decision, because when you don't have to script scenes where characters interact, all you have to do is write the text and draw the 2D art necessary for the characters, and then have it all scripted. So it's a very cheap way to get narrative into your game, and because it's cheap, it allows you to go a little crazy with that narrative compared to a standard video game. So you could make it branch more, you could make it take more of the player's decisions into account, and so on. You know, this wasn't really much of a thing in the Banner Saga. That's more of a linear narrative. But Ash of Gods, this little indie RPG from a Russian dev studio called Aurum Dust, it did that. It took the visual novel style of storytelling, and it just went wild with the reactivity and choice and consequence stuff, up to the point where your main character can die and the story continues. And that's something that you don't see very often in video games.
That sounds crazy and also very inspirational. Like, that sounds like the game was that's like even more in depth than, like, I have not seen a game like that, like that sounds like that he's even come close to that, apart from maybe like Detroit Become Human. But even then, that's like sort of a handheld, straightforward storytelling game with like just real-time event button clicking. But that sounds really, really cool. So do you hope to make something like that one day?
So what ended up happening, right? I absolutely fell in love with this game. The music, the art, the story, the characters, the reactivity, the RPG systems, the combat, everything was my jam, to a T. But one problem. Because it's a Russian development studio, whoever they hired to do the translation kind of messed up. Some of it is fine. Most of it is fine. I'd say about 70 to 80% of it is absolutely fine. But the rest can end up reading like Google Translate at times. And that just felt very sad to me, because narrative is such an integral focus of a game like that. And I felt that this is a giant missed opportunity for this development studio. So I just went to the Steam forums and told them, hey guys, I don't know if you're aware, but your script has some issues. And if you would like, I'd be available for free, just because I really like the game. I can proofread the script for you. I've been doing creative writing specifically, for almost 20 years, just as long as I've been doing pen and paper stuff. And they ended up agreeing, to my surprise.
Huh. Well, that's certainly cool. And what? So, okay, so you have so that's a really cool accomplishment. So after Fallout Miami, it's definitely still in the works, and you still got a little bit to go. But what's the plan after this? Like, what do you want to do? Like, I'm sure there's so much in your head that are like the gears are turning, and you like are already starting to develop a bunch of stuff. Would you at some point want to be a writer for Bethesda?
I mean, I would absolutely love that. So, what the game plan, right? I'm concurrently working on Fallout Miami, Ash of Gods, and another indie game, which is also something that people should really check out. It's called Dead in Vinland. And it's this, so get this, right? It's a survival RPG. So it has like base building survival elements, and but it's also like a 2D game. So it's not like a sandbox thing. It has a story that's very structured, but it also has the exact same issue. It's made by a French developer. So their script is also badly realized, but decently written. So I gave them the same offer, but this time I actually have the credentials of, hey, I'm working on Ash of Gods. My name is in the credits. And that helped them agree to that as well. So I'm now working on these 2 indie games where I'll be credited as a copy editor on the script. I'm working on Miami. Hopefully Miami ends up becoming a reality, since there's always the risk for these super large mods to never get released. We're well aware of that, and we're trying to make sure that doesn't happen. But once all that stuff is done and is put squarely in my portfolio, the idea is to just look for more projects to get involved with, something in a slightly more official capacity. Since I'm both on Ash of Gods and Dead in Vinland, I'm mostly working as a fan. I did actually, very surprisingly, the translation company on Ash of Gods, the guy that I'm working with there, Mike, wonderful guy, he offered me a freelance proofreading gig after he saw how well I was doing with Ash of Gods. So that's also something, again, just going in the portfolio. So definitely building up somewhat of a CV, right? Maybe even somewhat of a reputation if Fallout Miami ends up being received well. If my work on Ash of Gods ends up improving the review score of the game, since it's really only less than 90 on Steam just because of the translation of the script. Very sad thing. Lovely that they decided to let me help with that.
Sounds like you're going to be the savior for it, for sure. And I think definitely Fallout Miami is going to be a huge thing. Before we continue that, just real quick, want to say thank you to Thanox for following, Karma Chameleon as well, Shadow Assassins for the host, and also thank you to Sice to Liker 1313, and then the Killer Cup. Sorry for butchering that second to last one. Thank you for following, guys. That's super awesome of you. So I think definitely like that will help the resume, and also it sounds like you're kind of like definitely the clutch hero coming in to save these indie developed games, and also just these games in general that I think are going to be great. And it seems like you have wonderful stories to tell. So what would you recommend? Like, obviously networking is such a crucial thing, but do you have any tools as a writer for networking to build these connections up? Because the way you start building reputation is like you make the connections and you step forward. You're not afraid to say no. You have to not be afraid to hear the word no at all. So you got to be careful with that stuff. So once you build up that courage, how do you utilize that? Where do you like? Where would you say is a good place for writers to start off at and start networking?
Right, so just before I answer that, I just want to add something to the previous question. Within the Fallout Miami team, there have been murmurings of going indie after we're done with Fallout Miami. Not the whole team, just certain members. But that's also something that might end up working out. So yeah, how to get started, and boy, what a question that is, especially when it comes to writing, right? So, I'll be brutally honest, there's this aspect to it. Everyone thinks they can write, and I tend to believe that everyone could write, but it takes a lot of experience, and I don't mean experience in writing itself, it takes a lot of reading to be able to write well. And it's not just for something like grammar, it's also for dictionary. It's also to learn how to structure plot lines. It's also to learn how to build believable characters. In fact, I don't even like using the word characters, I like using the word people to refer to personalities within a story that are well realized. So writing people is something that's very difficult to do and requires a lot of experience, so reading and writing. So obviously it takes a lot of training on your own time to get good at this stuff, but even being good isn't enough. I'm firmly in the belief that the best writers out there are people who haven't written anything and likely never will. So it really, you have to start working on something, work on a project, finish it, be able to put it to your name. Don't just say, I'm James, I want to be a writer for you. Be James, I have written this, and I want to be a writer for you. Because in creative fields, like various types of art, music, and writing, you need to have something to show. You can't just show up and say, I want to do this. And for things that are more visual or more easy to appreciate, such as music, it's straightforward for those. It's not easy or simple, but it's definitely straightforward. You can show off your 2D art, you can show off your music, and whatever company you're trying to land a job at or even an internship position, they'll see that and they can say, okay, this guy's definitely good at this, we'll give him the position. But when it comes to writing, that's not that simple. No one's going to read your 50,000 word fantasy novel if that's the only thing you can say that you have. So there really is no easy answer. You just have to look for these opportunities and jump on them. Just like this indie game, this little indie RPG, Ash of Gods. I just threw out an offer at them. It's a small team. They can use all the help they can get. They agreed, and now I can put that to my name, an actual product in this industry in which I am credited. And sure, partially I just got lucky to stumble on the game, fall in love with it, and get in touch with the developers. But here's the thing. You can't get lucky unless you roll the dice. And the more often you roll the dice, the higher the chance that you're going to get lucky, right? You don't expect to land a bullseye with the first dart you throw. You throw a lot of darts and eventually you land that bullseye. So basically, to summarize, work on your writing skills, work on your writing portfolio, and definitely be as prolific as possible. Just search for opportunities, search for projects to attach your name to. And once you actually can say, okay, I've been a part of this indie game, or I've been a part of this webcomic, or whatever, then you actually have something to show that might interest the company. And if that's the case, then your chances of getting picked for an internship position or a job opportunity just increase from there.
So what's the scale of a project that somebody should start out with, that an indie team or just some indie developer would be grateful for, like just be able to have somebody to allow them to grow with this game?
Modding is great. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, because it's sort of hard to find that gray area where there's an indie developer or an indie team that's like, we're looking for a good writer, but if you're looking to grow and develop, we're okay with that. Like, what is the scale of that project?
So modding is definitely great because it's within the same field, right? It's in the industry, it's video games. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the only thing you go for. Like I said, you could do a webcomic. You could even do something like a blog as well. But generally, if someone's trying to just get their feet wet, their toes wet, when it comes to writing in video games, it would be good to start with something small. So a small scale mod for a video game, or like a smaller webcomic, or maybe a machinima series would also be good. Just in general, creative things that can show off your talent and ability to write.
So when you landed this first indie game to be a writer for, what did you show them?
So with Ash of Gods, right, so the things that I used to quote-unquote impress them, I told them that I'm the lead writer on Fallout Miami, and that we have this teaser trailer out with 1.5 million views, that it's a big project with over 100 people that have been involved with it, that I've been working on it for a while. I showed off some of the things that I'd done for Fallout Miami. Outside of that, I just told them what my experience in writing is. So outside of the things I've already mentioned, in my native language, I've done quite a bit of writing as well, which, okay, it doesn't necessarily relate to this particular task because it's not in English, but it does show that you're able to work through a text. And that's also something that's very important. It's not just about how good your ideas are or how decent your dialogue sounds if you're writing dialogue. It's also about the structure. It's also about the grammar. It's also about being able to work quickly with these things. So there are a lot of sides to it. But yeah, the stuff I showed them is mostly Fallout Miami, some stuff I've been doing on my own that's not in English, and I explained to them what my background in writing is. So you don't necessarily have to have just a portfolio, right? When you're trying to land a position, you have to let the company know what kind of person you are. You have to tell them why you're interested in this particular position. That just goes the same for everything. It's not even just writing. This is just general advice. If you're trying to land a job somewhere, you tell them who you are and why you're interested in the job and what you think you can contribute to their company or whatever it happens to be.
I absolutely agree with that statement. It's very important to be able to, show up. You have to put some character into yourself, because otherwise you're just saying you're a writer with skills. And while that might be fine and dandy, they need to also make sure that the chemistry is right and make sure that you're able to get along with everybody. There's multiple sides to the story, and as a writer, you definitely know that for sure. But okay, so there's potentially the ability or the possibility or murmurs, as you said, that there might be like an indie team after Fallout Miami is completed and such. So now that you have this group and you're pretty happy, have you guys, like, what is with that being said, how did you sort of stumble upon these people, and how did you manage to, like, because that's kind of like the most crucial thing. Like, what are good forums and sources that you use to network is probably what I'm asking.
So how the team got put together. We actually really rely on publicity. So even things like this would probably help bring someone to the team, as long as someone with decent skills is listening to this podcast. So we released the teaser and the trailer very deliberately to attract people, and also to showcase the tonal structure of the project itself. We tend to stick to places where you would see other hopeful video game developers or just people interested in the industry. So places like ArtStation for 3D asset artists. When it comes to writing, like I said earlier, absolutely everyone thinks they can write. So that means there's actually no shortage of hopeful writers. We just happened to get lucky that we were able to catch a few actually really decent ones. Certain members of the Fallout Miami team, I absolutely love working with them. We have, between the several of us that have professional experience, we've got decades of professional experience. So it's really, the writing is at a really high level when it comes to just the ability of the people involved. But as far as networking, you just have to put yourself out there. There's no go here, it's go everywhere that's involved with what you're into. If you are into video games, get involved in modding. Start taking part in the Nexus forums. Try to get into a modding team somehow. See if you can find some communities. For example, there's a community called the Creators Network that are helping us out with Fallout Miami, providing voice actors. Join communities like that are sort of these bulk groups of talent.
All right, and that must be very exciting. And the voice acting aspect, I'm sure a lot of people are like very interested in getting in on as well. But I think definitely, would you say that writers more than not are kind of like unsung heroes or underappreciated?
Yeah, definitely. Especially in a visual medium like this. Just the thing is, it takes a little more from someone who's experiencing a work of art to appreciate something that's kind of purely mental. if it's voice acted in a way that really encapsulates the writing. So this isn't every video game, right? Even a video game with good voice acting might not actually reflect the exact tone the writer was going for. So writing is a little harder to appreciate. So that's why only very few games tend to stand out with their writing. While when it comes to visuals and music, there's a much larger number, since you simply need to look and hear to appreciate those art forms, while with writing you actually have to think about it. So it tends to be a little more involved when it comes to that. Whether they're unsung heroes, I mean, in video games you have certain writers like Amy Hennig or Chris Avellone, my favorite writer in video games, that really have made a name for themselves because they've worked on so many extremely acclaimed projects, both critically and fan reception. So, I mean, I guess there's no easy answer to that as well, but I will say writing has these specificities about it, right? It has a very low barrier to entry. You need a keyboard and a word processor. So everyone thinks that they're able to write just because they're able to go through the mechanical motions of putting text on a screen, but it takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of experience with written text to get to a point where you can say that, yes, you can actually write. And because there are so many people that think they can do it, I guess it's kind of more difficult for the ones that stand out to truly stand out, just because there's such a large breadth of people that have created in this space.
And you kind of also just segued into my other question, is like, who would you recommend for people to study for, and also what games do you recommend for those looking to be very in-depth storytellers?
I'll just go for general writer as opposed to in-depth storyteller, because there's multiple sides to it, just like everything.
Very true, absolutely true. There's groups within groups within groups.
Multifaceted, one would say, just like a D20.
Very, very well put. Very well put.
So yeah, games I would recommend people check out to get good examples of writing and to learn from. So my favorite video game of all time, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. That is the one game I recommend to anyone who wants to see how you do natural dialogue. And it's not natural in the sense that it's realistic. Those are two very different things. It's natural in the sense that it fits into the world seamlessly. It is perfectly written to represent its setting. And the dialogue just creates that effect that I mentioned earlier, where these characters feel like people. So that's definitely a game people should check out. It's also just a great game in general. It wouldn't be my favorite game if it just had good dialogue in that sense. It has like the great RPG systems. It's very immersive and so on. People should also definitely check out Planescape Torment. As cliche as it is to say, that's probably the best written video game out there. It has a very in-depth narrative with so many overlapping sides to it that it boggles the mind. It's difficult to comprehend that game even from several playthroughs. So that's definitely something that needs to be checked out as well. I mean, it also depends on what type of writing, right? Because if someone wants to be very specifically focused on fantasy, then they should obviously focus on looking at what good fantasy is. So, good fantasy games, you would be checking out the original Baldur's Gate games, you'd be checking out Neverwinter Nights 2, Mask of the Betrayer very specifically. That's one of the most underrated RPGs out there.
What is it called again?
Neverwinter Nights 2, Mask of the Betrayer.
Okay. And, I guess, sort of to hone that question a little bit more, I guess what you said for like natural dialogue, check out Vampire what?
Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines.
Okay, and what are I guess a couple other games that should hone general tools that can be implemented into all different kinds of subgroups of and groups of writing?
So just before that, one of the users in our community Discord has told me that I should say that I love coconuts on the stream. So there you go, Bertoni. You got your wish.
Fair enough.
So yeah, obviously you should check out Fallout. Choice and Consequence is big when it comes to RPGs, and Fallout is a great example of how to do choice and consequence, very specifically Fallout New Vegas. Another thing New Vegas does, so CRPGs from the 90s, right? People like to bring these up as these are the classics, these are the good ones, these are the ones that are better than the new ones. But that's actually not entirely true, because there's this other side to it. These old RPGs, They were supposed to be translations of the pen and paper stuff that the developers were playing back when they were teenagers. But there's one crucial aspect that's lacking from those older games, and that's the fact that RPG doesn't just mean dialogue choices. It means that, okay, so actually here is the definition of a role-playing game. For anyone wondering, this is the concrete definitive edition, K. Constantine 2018. This is what an RPG is. An RPG is a game in which your character's specific attributes impact what is going on. So it doesn't necessarily have to have character creation. The Witcher is an RPG because Geralt's attributes impact the events that are going on, and generally people say it's not an RPG if you can't make choices. But of course, choices allow you to modify those attributes. So that's how that works. So play those older games, but also play Fallout New Vegas, because that actually that's more of an RPG than Fallout 1 or 2 are, to be quite honest, because in New Vegas, there are, quite frankly, more skill checks going on.
It is. I absolutely agree with that statement. And, okay, I like all these answers. Is there any last words you would like to say before we close out that you want to tell to all those aspiring writers and people that are also looking up to you while you're making this incredible game with a bunch of other incredible people in this incredible timeline?
So video games are awesome. Stories in general are awesome. Definitely read books. Don't just focus on games. Read books, because that allows you to look at how a text is structured, look at how characters are built, look at how they're placed in a setting, and so on. But the one thing I'll say, you have to work hard at it. You can't just come in with the idea, I want to be a writer. No, you have to come in with the mindset, I am going to be a writer. So you're going to work very hard at it. You're going to read, you're going to play, you're going to write, you're going to put yourself out there. You're going to try your best to be noticed. And maybe, with just a little bit of luck, you might actually land an opportunity like I did to maybe help out with an indie game, maybe be a part of some big major mod project like Fallout Miami. Put that on a portfolio, apply for a job somewhere down the line. Maybe you'll end up making it.
Well, hopefully everybody does, and those are very honest and inspiring words, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming on the show, Constantine. Thank you so much.
Oh, no worries. I take absolutely every opportunity to talk my mouth off for hours.
Well, it certainly is well-articulated thoughts and very humble opinions, and I like them all, and I think they're all very justifiable. And just a tip for all you podcasters out there, booking a writer for your podcast is probably going to have some of the most intellectual conversations you could ever ask for. So, yeah, Constantine's a perfect example of that. Fallout Miami is going to be coming out at some point. Is there any set date, or is that just going to be kept on just on down low for now?
Coming out when it's done.
That is probably the biggest mood and biggest answer that any of us could ever say. I respect that 100%. But either way, very excited. If you want to keep up with updates on it, it is at Fallout Miami on Twitter.
Yep.
Okay, and you guys can find that out, and also there's his Twitter next to his name at kconstantine_, where you can follow him, and concept artist, I would totally be up for that. Yeah, but thank you for coming on the first episode of the Lobby. If you like what you heard here, there will be more of podcasts of the Lobby, and then if you just like gaming in general, I do those streams as well. And yeah, it's just all streaming of esports and gaming all the time. And thank you once again, Constantine, and we will see you guys in the next episode.
Thank you.
Goodbye.